Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video: how important is long-range pistol shooting? This can be a somewhat loaded question because some people's definition of what long-range is can be different than someone else's definition. It's generally accepted that the handgun isn't used for the same distances that you get from a rifle. However, if you knew you were going to have to take a long-range shot, you probably wouldn't bring a handgun. And from a strictly citizen point of view, you might not go at all. So when we're talking about long range, we have to have a little bit of context there. And I think the context is very easy for you to apply personally to your own life if you think about the maximum distances you might have to shoot from. Before we get into that, let's look at possibility and probability. Am I more likely to have to take a shot at a close range or a long distance range? Well, I think a lot of that depends on lifestyle, occupation, but some of it also depends on the nature of the crime in which we're encountering, where we're going to use lethal force. If you think about a personal crime, if someone is attempting to rob me, they're probably going to do that from closer than further away. Some convicted criminals I've talked to in the past who committed property crimes and strong arm robberies or armed robberies, they got to get close enough to have a conversation. Hey, give me your wallet, give me your keys, give me your ATM card, what's your PIN number? Conversation's got to take place. Conversation distance. So use of force from that distance is probably going to be pretty close, 0 to 5 to 7 meters, probably within that range. Of course, we don't want to get into the habit of looking at bright line distances for our self-defense practice, but it is important to know that common sense says if a conversation has to take place, the chances of that shooting being close are greater than that shooting being further away, because no one's going to, I'd say with a great degree of probability, highly likelihood, no one's going to rob you from 25 meters at gunpoint. Can it happen? Absolutely, but it's less likely, and we're talking about most likely to least likely. But that's just a profit crime. What about a personal crime? Someone literally just wants to hurt you because you are you, something you did, something you may have done. Road rage situations are probably going to be relatively close range, unless you pull into a parking lot and you're halfway into a store when the threat appears. And then the distance can be, who knows? Parking lots are pretty big. Is there a conversation that takes place beforehand? That may determine where the distance begins. Or does that person immediately just start using force against you and you're forced to defend yourself? It's hard to predict distances, but when we think about what is long-range shooting, here's a perfect example. This is one of the longest shots I'd have to take in my own house. It may not fall under the definition of what long-range is, but this is close to 20 meters. That's a pretty significant distance. If I were to push that target all the way back into my spare bedroom, I'm looking at, in the neighborhood of 25 meters at the longest possible shot I'd have to take. Does that mean I'll ever have to do this? Man, I hope not. But this is just inside my home. Now, houses are set up different, floor plans are different, and even if your house is wide and long, your floor plan may prevent this kind of shot from being necessary. But then think about directly outside of your house or in your workplace. Go to the grocery store and stand at the beginning of an aisle and look towards the end. One of my alumni, Chris Hill, recently did a great post on Facebook about this, where he just went to his local grocery store and took some photos and showed people what those long distance were. This is something to consider when you think about, will I have to take those long distance shots? As with everything, we tend to not practice things that we aren't good at. If you aren't good at long range pistol shooting, you are probably going to be less likely to practice it as much as you practice your up close speed draw, speed rock shooting. I get it. Shooting efficiently from close range is very John Wick, and it's very cool, and it's a very good skill because distance gives us something. Distance does. If I have 10 meters between me and a threat versus 0 meters between me and a threat, I am going to relatively have more time and more options to respond to that threat. So your precision and your efficiency at close range to be able to shoot fast when speed is needed is very important. But it's just as important, again, relatively speaking, to be able to shoot fast at a target that is 10, 15, 20, 25, 35, 45 meters away, getting closer to the unrealistic but still possible, I should say improbable but still possible scenarios where you might have to take that longer range shot. Just thinking about the world that you interact with. What might be the longest shot you'd have to take? Have you ever looked at, okay, in my house I know the longest shot I'd possibly take down a hallway is 10 meters or 15 meters. Are you practicing that to proficiency? Are you practicing it in your own home with a SIRT pistol or an airsoft pistol? Are you working it in low light? Are you seeing how your sights react in your own home? The places where you spend the most time are the places where you are most likely to need to use force. Inside your demographic, inside your daily lifestyle, inside your workplace, and the places that you frequent, the theaters you go to, the grocery stores you go to, the gas station you go to. What are these distances? What are these distances? What can these distances be? If you think about any general geographical area that you enter into, they're more likely going to be able to present a longer shot just as easily as they can present a smaller shot. Yeah, if you go to one of those, your normal gas station is one of those just gas stations where the kiosk and you can't actually physically go inside, you pay through a window and like there's a soda machine there and that's pretty much it, then yeah, you're probably not going to have to get inside an enclosed space like a gas station. But everybody's been in a gas station, and there's plenty of gas stations that are very, very compacted, but there's also newer gas stations where the inside can give you. Here in the South, we have a chain of gas stations called Quick Trip, and the newer ones have very wide open floor plans. Most gas stations have, 2 or 3 aisles. Those aisles can be 10, 15, 20 meters long. So it comes back to, what is my definition of long range? How am I practicing long range? I do not consider 15 meters to be a long range shot. I don't start talking about long range of the pistol until I get back to 25 and plus. I don't like bright line distances. I'm not a fan of using those distances unless there's a specific reason for getting data. I want that metric for a reason, such as zeroing or something like that, because even though I'm pretty good at estimating distance, where I go doesn't have nice painted lines or little orange cones. It tells me how far away I am from what I'm shooting at. So to really sum it up, long-range shooting with a pistol is extremely important. Really think about what's the longest range shot you might have to take in your daily life. And then factor in the unknowns and the uncontrollables. You can't really predict with even close to a high degree of accuracy what kind of situation you may have to use force in, if you have to use force. Because if we could predict it, we probably would just avoid going altogether. Occupation specific. Those of you in law enforcement, you have no idea. You may have to take a shot from a street up a lawn, across a lawn, onto the porch of a house, or into the open door of a house, or down the aisle of a Walmart, or between the pumps at a gas station. You don't know when your situations are going to present either. There have been some recent very notable law enforcement engagements where the distances were extremely increased. Granted, law enforcement should have access to patrol rifles. The shotguns are great. They do serve a purpose, but when it comes to shooting people at extended distances, you really want that patrol rifle, hopefully with a variable magnification optic or red dot at the very least. But regardless of profession, regardless of occupation, lifestyle also dictates. And the places that you live and the places that you frequent are greatly going to dictate. For police officers, the places that you patrol. You got a big open park, because that's a thing. Any place that people gather, you can see a use of force taking place, because uses of force don't occur where people don't go. So any place that you run into human beings, it's possible that you may have to use force in that location. For the private citizen, the same could be true. Defense of a third party. What if you just happen to be present when, and again, this is unlikely, but possible, and it has occurred before. What if you just happen to be present in a place where someone comes in and just starts killing people? You don't really get to determine that initial distance. Now, you may be able to maneuver yourself and find a better position and get closer. And if you're honest with your own skill set and you know that, hey, I never practiced at 25 plus, or I've never practiced at 15 plus, being honest with yourself, you may be like, yeah, I need to get closer before I can take a shot because, one, I don't think I can hit him from here, and two, this is a lot more complicated than a square range with a paper target. That's a definite cathartic event. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to how much time you can and are willing to dedicate to practicing longer distance pistol shooting. The handgun is less than ideal for this type of shooting, but it's important that you have an understanding and appreciation of what your skill level is. Even if it's not something that you're going to dedicate a whole lot of time to, you should at least know how well you perform under range stress. And then when you factor in additional stress under real life situations, you can expect your performance to be a slightly less to significantly less, depending on how well you cope with the stress of the situation and how that stress affects your ability to use the firearm itself. That's a very hard thing to predict, so we won't really get into that. That's a totally different conversation. But Think about these factors. If you're not good at it, why? The only real excuse for not being good at something is because you haven't put in the dedication and the practice to get good at it. So the question was, is long-range pistol shooting important? Being able and being as proficient as possible on the firearm that you choose is important. So long-range shooting is part of that. It is less probable, again, that you're going to have to take that long-range shot with a handgun, but since it can happen, we should at least know what our personal performance envelope is so we can make knowledgeable decisions if we have to solve that problem in real time. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.